Hello, and welcome to Street Aesthete. This is the show where we explore street view coverage of a noteworthy location, looking out for beautiful architecture and stunning scenery, while I amuse myself by remarking on what we see. And today we're going to be visiting India, we're going to the southwestern state Goa, and we're going to be visiting its capital, Panaji. And I think what we'll do is we're going to drop right in on this sort of Riviera here, and we'll just take a look around. Now, this is only the second time on the channel that I've ever visited a place in Asia, and it's certainly the first time I've ever been to anywhere in India, so I'm not too sure what to expect. But what I do know is that this area of India, unlike quite a lot of the rest of it, which was a British colony at one point or another, was a Portuguese colony. And so we ought to be seeing some differences, perhaps, in the street layout, in the architecture. And indeed, the first thing that I do note that looks like it could be somewhat Portuguese is this lovely balustrade here, up against the river. Although, as I say, because I haven't really looked around India at all before, it could well be that this sort of street infrastructure is just uniquely Indian, isn't really anything to do with the Portuguese influence at all. So Panaji became the capital of Imperial Portuguese India in the 18th century following the outbreak of a plague in Old Goa, which is just a little bit further east. And it was only in about 1961 that the territory was ceded to the nation of India itself. So we might say that this place is only recently independent. And I'm enjoying very much already the lush foliage that we can see here, and to see it framing this beautiful building here, which hopefully we're going to be able to see a bit more of as we proceed. But we've got a wonderful deep red colour here, almost a burgundy, with these little white highlights around it, contrasting beautifully with the greenery. And as I say, this could be all uniquely Indian, but I'm very much reminded of Portuguese architecture surveying this scene, especially with the variation in colours. Seems to be a busy road, and we will push into the town proper at some point, but I think we'll just continue down this road for a little while. Having glanced at the map before, I've got an idea of where some of the landmarks that we may be interested in are to be found. And this building feels as though it could perhaps be a little bit newer, but made in imitation perhaps of some of the older colonial buildings that we've seen behind us. There's a bit less ornamentation around the windows here, and indeed the facade is dotted with these fans, which somewhat spoils the effect. But the thing that really is missing is some kind of gable on top, a little bit of extra ornamentation to avoid having too many straight lines on the facade. And it is wonderful to see all of these colours. Not sure if we can get into there. We may just have to jump. Some lovely detail in the window there, and indeed above it. And I find this wonderfully evocative. Something about the shadiness, the dense foliage, the red earth that we see here, and the greenery beyond. Just gives us a very distinct sense of place. We do have lots of newer buildings around here, most of which are not terribly distinguished, but at least they've taken the cues of some of the bright colours on the older buildings, and indeed I think that these arched windows may be something of a taste of the Indian vernacular. Interesting thinking about these columned arcades and where the idea of the column came from. Of course, we often think of the classical world of Greece and Rome with columns, but something like this certainly wouldn't look out of place in Islamic architecture or in the buildings of other Far Eastern cultures. And I'd be curious to know about who borrowed from whom. Jumping over to this road here to take a closer look at this building. Definitely in need of a lick of paint, perhaps a bit of replastering there. And I think we'll head back down the way we came now and jump a little bit further down the park to go and see this blue and white building here. Something about the street layout here doesn't remind me quite of Portugal, but it does remind me of Brazil, which of course is another former Portuguese colony, and that is a very wonderful building just there. Get a little bit closer to it. It's interesting. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly what about it is Portuguese and what feels sort of Indian and feels a little bit Eastern, you know. It's definitely got this Oriental flavour to it. The triangular shapes above the windows are very classical, as is this balcony. And indeed, these pointed features along the top feel very distinctly Portuguese to me, but perhaps it's this circular motif that gives the building its distinct Indian character. Wow. I wasn't expecting that. I knew that this church was somewhere in the town, but I really wasn't expecting to turn around and just see that. That is absolutely fabulous. Incredible. Wow. Alright, here we go. So this, I presume, must be the Church of Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. What a fabulous scene. So much to comment on here. First of all, just this set of steps here is really striking, and I think that's perhaps because of the slightly uneven nature of the pattern. We've got longer bricks, shorter bricks, and it seems to have been laid in as somewhat of a haphazard way. But then also it's the very thick white grouting around the brickwork that almost reminds me of a sort of exaggerated red brick facade from, say, a Belgian building or something like that. But it's also just got a bit of a hint of almost a giraffe's skin patterning about it. Then we've got the church itself. Well, in fact, we won't even come to the church facade just yet because we've got these beautiful staircases. I would say that these were built around the same time as the church, which I believe was 1541, if memory serves, and then perhaps this set of stairs is a slightly later addition. And can we get any closer to it? Yes, wonderful. And can we get a step yet closer, I wonder? So we can see lots of Baroque features here, like this beautiful curlicue. I would say these are not the original windows. This more sort of stylized fan shape reminding me of Art Deco of the 1920s. Although that said, you know, that could almost be seen as a stylized representation of the shell motif, the open clamshell that we do see as a Baroque motif. Unusually for India, which is a country that is predominantly Hindu, but also has large Muslim and Buddhist populations, the state of Goa has a significantly large minority of Christian people living in it, around 25%. Very beautiful. A very, very beautiful place indeed. And what a stunning church. It doesn't get old, does it? That is just a fabulous view. But in any case, there's plenty more to see in Panaji, so we'll carry on. Now then, I think we want to duck down this street here and head south. Now we're currently heading away from the old Latin quarter, Fontainas, but I want to take a small detour down in this direction because I know that there is a Hindu temple that is worth paying a visit to. This little area set aside for greenery and for these large trees also reminds me of Brazil. Quite often in Rio de Janeiro, you would see these flower beds with large exotic trees coming out of them. But again, it's difficult to say how much of this is a Portuguese influence and how much of it is just Indian street design. This building, for example, definitely feels a lot more Asian in its design language. And a lovely bit of stained glass there as well. But this then brings me back to Brazil, with the vines and creepers growing over the electric wiring. Ah, and here we are, we've come to the Hindu temple that I wanted to pay a visit to. This is Shree Mahalaxmi Temple. Forgive the pronunciation. Yeah, really quite a beautiful building. Wonderful colours and great detail on the top here. I really appreciate these. I don't know if we could quite call them crenellations. They're certainly not quite gables. I suppose they're just decorations, breaking up the otherwise long straight line that we would have seen on the top of the building. And I wonder when this was built. I would say these large breeze blocks would suggest that this is a relatively new construction. And let's now, I think, jump back to the Church of the Immaculate Conception, and we'll start to head into the east of the town in this direction, going alongside the church here. And we're starting now to get into the neighbourhood of the Latin Quarter. And what a beautiful area it is. Looks as though this building has been converted somewhat, with these newer looking windows on the top. And it's somewhat strange, I suppose, to see Rua de Natal, to see these Portuguese street signs in such an exotic location. But it does make me wonder, for a Portuguese person visiting Panaji, how exotic would it feel? Many of the places that the British Empire colonised have radically different terrains and climates to the homeland of Great Britain. And so each of these places must have felt very foreign and far-flung, very much contrasting from the cold, dingy, windswept island at the heart of the empire. Meanwhile, the Portuguese homeland is in a much more southerly latitude and benefits from the warming influence of the Gulf Stream across the Atlantic. So that while we are certainly a lot further south here than the Iberian Peninsula, the climate may not be all that dissimilar, certainly more similar than, say, Great Britain and Kenya, or Britain and India for that matter, although it must be said that also the humidity is probably quite a lot higher in India than in Portugal. But I wonder if a Portuguese person visiting this country might have a bit of the same sort of sense that I have when visiting New Zealand, a place that has a more similar climate, that is to say temperate, and indeed in its less mountainous areas a not too dissimilar terrain. Visiting New Zealand as an Englishman is a bit like stepping into some sort of strange parallel dimension. There are certainly similarities and things that feel familiar, but there's a great sense also of being very far from home that one can't quite put one's finger on. And so I wonder how much of that experience is shared by a Portuguese European visiting the former Portuguese colonies. I think this is perhaps one of the touristic landmarks, the Panjim People's Art Gallery. Panjim was the Portuguese name for the city. Some lovely mosaic work here. Ooh, and it looks as though this may be another Hindu temple. I must say I just find the bright colours of the buildings in amongst the dense foliage very charming. And we're heading off now, quite a way out of the town, in search of another temple landmark. There may be a bit of a winding road to get to it, but we shall see what there is to comment upon as we proceed. Aha, and there it is up on the hill. We get our first glimpse of it. This certainly seems like it would be a quiet and desirable neighbourhood just outside of the city. And there's something about this dome here that really reminds me of a building that we saw in our exploration of Coimbra in Portugal, going through the town's botanic garden. And there, by the way, is the first instance we've seen of the Indian flag. I'm always trying to spot the national flag of the country we're in when exploring its streets. It's a very enticing building. I love the way it's perched up here on the hill, surrounded by the trees and the leaves. Look at this huge villa here. Very secluded. And that does seem to be the entrance to the temple, so it may be that at this point we need to step off of the street and get into some of the other coverage here. It is proving rather difficult to find a great view of the facade of this building. Perhaps we'll get one here. Wow, stunning. This fabulous tower here. And this beautifully ornate dome like a crown. Rather like when I explored the area in Tokyo, Jiugaoka, in a previous video. I don't really know the design language of the place, so it's difficult for me to comment on the sorts of features that we see here, so I can only really admire them. Interesting, the wheels here. I would presume that they have some sort of religious significance, perhaps something to do with the samsaric cycle of rebirth. And it just feels as though, if left untended, the jungle will encroach upon this building and reclaim it. And I think that's about where we're going to end this video. We'll head back to Praça da Igreja, place of the church, and take a view of it from a little further down the street. Yeah, really striking as a centrepiece to the town. So this has been my second foray into Asia and my first into India. In terms of architecture, there has been some really beautiful, bright, colourful edifices from the Portuguese colonial times, along with some stunning Indian buildings, like the various Hindu temples that we've seen. It leaves me very curious to see more of India's architecture and scenery, And being an enthusiast as I am of British Victorian architecture in my own country, I'd be keen to see what was built elsewhere. So if you're Indian, or if you're familiar with India, please do let me know in the comments which cities should I visit in India to see some of the beautiful architecture that your country has to offer. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. Since you've made it this far, why not subscribe for more street view explorations of noteworthy locations, as well as games of GeoGuessr. And if you've enjoyed the music that you hear in this video, then take a look at my first channel, which is where I upload all of my original music.